Hi, very glad to see you on the channel. Before you start listening to the story, write in the comments whether you like the voice on the video. I used to believe that love was about sacrifice, about putting your partner's needs above your own. That's what I told myself each time Samantha belittled me in public or dismissed my opinions at home. As a stay-at-home father, I took pride in raising our two children, ensuring our household ran smoothly while Samantha excelled in her career as an HR director. Yet, somewhere along the line, the respect we once had for each other eroded, replaced by her biting remarks and my growing resentment. It started subtly. At dinner parties, she'd interrupt me, correcting minor details of my stories. Actually, David, it was a 3-day conference, not two. She'd chime in, her tone dripping with condescension. Friends would chuckle awkwardly, and I'd force a smile, swallowing the sting of her words. Her undermining became more blatant over time. At a neighborhood barbecue, while discussing the challenges of parenting, I mentioned the struggles of managing our son's recent bout with the flu. Samantha laughed, a sharp sound that drew everyone's attention. "Oh, please, David. It's not like you have a real job. Handling a sick child is hardly strenuous." The group fell silent, eyes darting between us. I felt the heat rise to my face, embarrassment mixing with anger. But I said nothing, taking a long sip of my beer instead. The pivotal moment came during Thanksgiving at her parents' house. Surrounded by family, we went around the table, sharing what we were thankful for. When it was Samantha's turn, she smiled warmly. "I'm grateful for my successful career and the promotions I've earned this year." Then, turning to me with a saccharine smile, she added, "And for David, who does his best at home, even if it's not contributing financially." Laughter erupted, but it felt like knives piercing my skin. I clenched my fists under the table, the turkey and stuffing turning to ash in my mouth. Her words echoed in my mind, "Not contributing financially," as if my worth was solely tied to a paycheck. I glanced at our children, oblivious to the tension, and wondered what lessons they were absorbing about respect and partnership. That night, as we prepared for bed, I couldn't hold it in any longer. "Why do you always belittle me in front of others?" I asked, my voice trembling with suppressed emotion. She looked at me, genuinely surprised. "Oh, don't be so sensitive, David. It's all in good fun. Everyone knows you're a great dad. But you make me feel insignificant," I replied, struggling to keep my voice steady. "Like what I do doesn't matter." She sighed, brushing past me. "You're overreacting. Let's not make a big deal out of nothing." With that, she climbed into bed, turning her back to me. I stood there, staring at the woman I once adored, now a stranger who seemed to take pleasure in my humiliation. The weight of unspoken words pressed down on me, and I realized that enduring this pain in silence was no longer an option. Something had to change, but I wasn't sure I had the strength to confront the storm that was brewing. The tension between us didn't dissipate after Thanksgiving. It calcified. Samantha went back to work with her usual confidence, barely acknowledging our conversation that night. For her, it was just another trivial moment, another thing I was too sensitive about. But for me, it became a constant echo in the back of my mind. The more I played her words over, the more I began to see the pattern, how every joke at my expense wasn't innocent but intentional. It wasn't about teasing. It was about power. I noticed it more and more, how she'd take little digs about my life at home, especially around her friends. One night, she invited a few colleagues over for drinks. The kids were upstairs, and I made the mistake of stepping into the living room just as they were talking about balancing work and family. Samantha spotted me, smiled, and said, "David's the expert at staying home. If only folding laundry paid rent." The room laughed politely. I laughed too, short, flat, bitter inside. I stood there with a tray of fresh drinks, suddenly aware of how invisible I felt in my own home. Later that week, we were out with a few old friends from college. It was one of those laid-back nights that should have been relaxing. Good food, old jokes, familiar faces. I'd always been the quiet one of the group, more comfortable listening than leading the conversation. But I shared a story about a moment with our daughter that made everyone laugh. Something real, something small but heartfelt. Samantha didn't even let the moment breathe. "Well, that's what happens when you've got too much time on your hands," she said, swirling her wine. David has nothing but time these days. Laughter again. Uneasy this time. Her words weren't funny. They were barbed. I stared at her across the table, not even hiding the anger in my eyes now. You ever get tired of making me the joke? The table went quiet. Samantha blinked, clearly caught off guard. What? You heard me, I said, my voice steady. Every time we're out with people, it's the same thing. I become the punchline. You act like what I do isn't worth anything. A friend cleared his throat. Hey man, it's not just anything. I cut in. It's constant. Samantha set her glass down, folding her arms. Don't do this now. No, I said louder. Let's do it now, since we're already entertaining everyone. The silence that followed was thick and tense. Nobody knew what to say. Samantha looked like she might explode, her face a blend of shock and irritation. I stood up. I'm going home. David, come on, but I didn't wait. I left the restaurant, got in the car, and sat there with my hands gripping the wheels so tight they ached. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just breathed. I had spent years swallowing these moments, brushing them aside, telling myself they weren't that bad. But they were. Every one of them chipped away at who I was, until all that remained was someone unrecognizable, even to himself. Back home, the house was quiet. I sat on the couch in the dark, listening to the hum of the refrigerator, the occasional creak of old wood settling. That night, I finally admitted the truth I'd been avoiding. The marriage wasn't just strained. It was damaged. And it wasn't just about emotional distance. It was about disrespect. Samantha got home an hour later. She didn't say anything at first. Just set her purse down and stood in the doorway, staring at me. You embarrass me tonight, she said, her voice low and tense. I laughed, not out of humor, but disbelief. You embarrass me every chance you get. Her jaw clenched. You made a scene, in front of our friends. Those same friends you humiliate me in front of, over and over. I stood up, walked past her, heading upstairs. I'm done pretending this is normal. You're not funny, Samantha. You're cruel. She didn't follow, didn't apologize. And I knew then, we weren't just drifting apart. We were sinking. It began as a subtle shift in the air, something just off. The way Samantha's voice softened on phone calls when she thought I wasn't listening, or how she started carrying her phone into the bathroom and keeping its screen down during dinner. I didn't want to believe it at first. After everything, despite the tension, the emotional bruises, I still held onto the thread of hope that maybe it was just stress. Maybe I was imagining it. But the mind doesn't make up details like that cologne scent on her scarf, or the small hotel-branded pen I found rolling in the dryer from a city she'd supposedly visited alone. The final clue didn't come wrapped in suspicion. It came wrapped in ribbon. I was cleaning out the hallway closet one afternoon, trying to make space for a box of winter clothes, when I found a sleek black bag tucked behind a row of boots. Curious, I pulled it out, thinking maybe it was something she'd forgotten from Christmas. The box inside was velvet. Heavy. I opened it slowly, and there it was, an expensive-looking watch, still in its wrapping, resting against a branded card that read, "Can't wait to see you again." There was no name, no receipt, just the card and the gift. I stood there, my hands trembling slightly, staring at the message. I read it again, trying to convince myself that maybe it was for me. That maybe she'd bought it ahead of a birthday or anniversary. But it wasn't addressed to me. And the style? It wasn't anything I'd wear. It was sleek, loud, flashy, the kind of thing someone buys when they want to impress a man who loves attention. I placed the box back carefully, exactly as I'd found it, closed the closet door, walked into the kitchen, and sat down, staring at the granite countertop until the room lost focus. I felt like a fool. All the times I had defended her, explained away her sharpness as stress, her coldness as exhaustion. I had protected the image of her so fiercely that I missed the woman she'd actually become. And now I couldn't unsee it. I didn't confront her, not yet. I needed proof, not just for my own sanity, but because I knew her. I knew how slick she was with words, how quickly she could twist a confrontation into a pity party, how she'd make herself the victim and paint me as unstable or jealous. That night, I told her I was taking the kids to my sister's for the weekend. She didn't question it, didn't seem concerned about why I needed space. That alone told me more than I wanted to know. When she left for work the next morning, I stayed behind. Pulled up her laptop, which she never bothered to lock. And there it was. Her email was clean, too clean, but the Zoom app had an auto-save chat feature. Buried in the log files was a trail of flirtation and late-night exchanges with someone named Scott. Most of it was harmless at first, until it wasn't. Lines like, "Wish you were staying longer this time," or "That suite had the best view," among other things. The one that shattered the last of my doubt. Last time in Chicago was unforgettable. Let's make this one even better. She had gone to Chicago just 2 weeks earlier. Said it was for a recruiting conference. Came home tired, aloof, distant. Now I knew why. The betrayal burned hotter, not just because she cheated, but because of how easily she lied. How she kissed our children goodnight, waved goodbye to me at the airport, and walked straight into another man's hotel room with my name still on her emergency contact form. I backed up everything, screenshots, chat logs, the timestamp file from Zoom. I printed the card from the closet, took photos of the gift, the branded pen, everything. I wasn't going to scream or plead. I wasn't going to cry and demand explanations. No, I was going to wait. Set the stage. Let her build her next lie with confidence, and then pull the rug out from under her when the spotlight was brightest. And so I did. Planning revenge doesn't look like what you'd think. There's no dramatic montage, no sinister music. It's measured, cold, methodical, just like any good operation. I spent the week pretending everything was normal, smiling, helping with homework, cooking dinner, playing the part of the calm and content husband while inside. I was archiving digital evidence and drafting a show-stopping ending she'd never forget. I took the fake corporate party flyer she left on the kitchen counter, the one she claimed was part of a company-wide HR retreat in Chicago, and scanned it. Her work trip had ended 2 weeks ago, yet she kept that same story in rotation, casual as ever, like nothing had happened. I knew better now. The key was timing. I needed something that would hit her hard and fast, leave no room for deflection or rescue. She didn't know the client she'd been sleeping with had already sent me the truth. He had reached out 2 days after I found the gift in the closet, clearly racked with guilt. His email was short, apologetic, full of shame. Said he didn't know she was married, that she told him we were separated, and that he didn't want to get in the middle of anything. He attached the hotel receipt from Chicago, her room charged to his name, and, most damning, a photo she had sent him from bed, wearing her conference lanyard. No makeup, just her and a smirk like she was proud of what she was doing. I stared at that image for a long time. Not out of sadness, not even anger. It was clarity. That was the moment I knew she deserved none of the grace I had once been willing to give. So I got to work. The next weekend, I told Samantha I wanted to throw a housewarming party. Something light, I said. New neighbors, coworkers, friends. Let everyone see the place now that we've finished the remodel. She loved the idea. Took over the guest list. Naturally. Invited everyone from her office. HR managers, coordinators, her own boss. She thought it was her event. A little ego parade. I booked the catering. Set up the lighting. Cleaned the house from top to bottom. But what she didn't know was that I also prepped the living room television and synced my laptop with a hidden file ready to go, titled innocuously, HR Recap. The thumbnail was just a black screen. On the day of the party, she floated around the house like a queen, greeting people with hugs and her practiced smile. The place buzzed with chatter and music. Drinks flowed. Laughter echoed off the walls. And then I stood in the center of the room and tapped a glass gently. Thank you all for coming. I began, lifting my glass with a calm smile. It's been a year of changes. So we thought, what better way to celebrate than with a quick highlight reel? You know, something special from one of Samantha's recent work trips. She turned to me, confused. David, what is this? I nodded to the screen. Let's roll it. The TV flickered to life. At first, just soft music. Then the title appeared in crisp, white letters. What happens in HR doesn't stay in Chicago. The room fell quiet. The first image was the hotel receipt, clear, dated, with her name tied to the guest suite. Then came the selfie. Her in bed, conference lanyard around her neck. The same smile she'd given me 100 times. Only this time, she'd given it to someone else. Gasps spread across the room like fire. Her coworkers stared, mouths open. Her boss dropped his drink. Someone muttered, "Is that?" Samantha's face drained of color. "Turn it off," she whispered. I didn't. The footage kept rolling. A blurred screen cap of the Zoom chats. Flirty lines. Dates. Innuendos. And finally, the closing slide, presented by David. Husband. Father. Truth seeker. I raised my glass again. To truth and to freedom. And then I walked out of the room. Behind me, the party dissolved. Her boss pulled her aside. Her coworkers backed away. The last sound I heard before shutting the door to the den was Samantha yelling my name, her voice high with panic. She didn't come home that night, and I didn't care. The morning after the party felt like walking through a field that had just been burned, charred but clear, quiet in the way only devastation could be. I brewed my coffee in silence, the sun rising through the kitchen window like nothing had happened. And in a way, nothing had. The world kept spinning. The dishwasher still hummed. The neighborhood still carried the soft sounds of sprinklers and cars starting. But everything inside my world had shifted. Samantha didn't come home. No texts, no calls, no explanations. Not that I expected any. Her silence wasn't surprising. It was consistent. She'd always shut down when the mask slipped, when she lost control of the narrative. She probably thought I'd come looking for her, demanding closure or begging for some apology that made it all go away. But I wasn't that man anymore. By noon, the calls began, not from her, but from her coworkers. First it was a manager named Rachel, then someone from the HR department I didn't even know. They weren't calling to defend her. They were calling to confirm the details. "We just didn't know," one of them said. "She always talked about you like you were just taking time off, like you were figuring stuff out. She never said you were married." Another added, "The lanyard selfie, that kind of sealed it." They weren't angry. They were stunned. The version of Samantha she sold them didn't match the one who'd been exposed on my living room screen. Her story didn't hold up in the light. I got an email from her boss 2 days later. Short, professional, cold. "Mr. Reynolds, thank you for bringing these matters to light. Samantha has been placed on indefinite administrative leave pending internal review. You will not be contacted further by our team. Translation, she's out. Professionally ruined." Whatever image she'd spent years cultivating in the corporate world was in ashes, and I didn't feel a shred of guilt. But then the doorbell rang. She stood on the front porch, sunglasses on, arms crossed tight over her chest like a shield. She looked smaller than I remembered, less polished, more raw. "David," she said, her voice strained, "I just want to talk." I stepped onto the porch, leaving the door open behind me, but not inviting her in. "I figured you might show up," I said calmly. "Didn't expect it to take this long." She took off her sunglasses. Her eyes were red. "You didn't have to do that at the party. You humiliated me." I tilted my head. "You lied to me, to your coworkers, to your lover. And then you posed for a photo wearing my last name and thought I'd never find out. You humiliated yourself, Samantha." I just turned up the volume. Her mouth tightened. "You ambushed me in front of everyone. You ambushed our life," I snapped. "While I was raising our kids, keeping the house together, you were sending selfies to some clown in a hotel room. You used a work trip as cover for an affair and wore my lanyard like it was some twisted badge of honor." She flinched. "I made a mistake." "No," I said, leveling my voice. "You made a series of choices. You planned the trip. You met the man. You checked into that suite. You sent those photos. You came home and still lied. Don't you dare water that down to a mistake." She looked down, hands trembling. "I don't know what to say." "There's nothing left to say," I replied. "You've been removed from my house, my life, and now your job's caught up too. You always thought you were smarter than everyone else. Turns out, you're not even smart enough to cover your tracks." "I thought we were falling apart," she whispered. "I thought we were done." And instead of talking to me, I said, "You built a fantasy behind my back. You let someone else play husband for the weekend. So now, go live in that fantasy. See how long it lasts without the lies." She nodded, biting her lip. "Can I just get some of my things?" I stepped aside. "They're boxed. In the garage. Take them and go. Don't come back." She didn't say another word. Just turned, walking stiffly to the side of the house, defeated. As she drove away with the trunk half full, I leaned against the doorway, the breeze carrying the last remnants of her perfume away from the porch. I didn't feel hollow. I felt free. The night after she picked up her boxes, the house settled into a kind of stillness I hadn't known in years. Not the cold, avoidant silence I'd grown used to with Samantha. This was the kind that wrapped around you like a heavy blanket and said, "It's over now." I sat on the back deck with a drink in hand, staring at the shadows on the lawn while the cicadas buzzed in waves. For the first time in months, there wasn't a weight pressing on my chest. No suspicion curling in my gut. No gut-wrenching guesswork. It was quiet, honest, and it was mine. The next morning, I woke up to a long email from her. Pages of justification dressed up as regret. She wrote about loneliness, about growing apart, about how the affair wasn't meant to hurt me. It was about her feeling seen for the first time in years. I didn't finish it. I skimmed halfway, closed my laptop, and deleted it. Because no matter how she tried to shape it, I wasn't going to participate in her therapy session. You don't cheat on someone, lie to their face, then ask them to understand your broken compass. A few hours later, she showed up at the door again. I need to say this in person, she began, standing with her hands clasped in front of her like she was waiting for judgment. You already wrote it, I said, not moving from the doorway. She shook her head. You didn't read it. I know. I need you to know that I never stopped loving you. I raised an eyebrow. You've got a real funny way of showing love. Her voice cracked. I didn't expect it to go this far. I thought it was just a break, a distraction, something that would stay in its corner. And then what? I asked. You'd come home and keep lying until you got bored again? She swallowed, her voice quieter. It wasn't just about him. It was about everything. I felt trapped. I felt like we were stuck. You were always home, the same routine. Because I was holding everything together, I snapped, stepping closer. While you were networking with hotel pillows. I made sacrifices for this family, and you call that being stuck. Her face dropped. I could see it hit her. Finally, the look of someone realizing the door behind them wasn't just closed. It was gone. I'm sorry, she whispered, the wind barely catching her voice. I'm not interested in your sorry, I said. I'm interested in you staying gone. She tried again. Can we at least talk about what happens next? About the house. Already filed, I said. You'll hear from my lawyer by the end of the week. The house is mine. Your name's off the account. Don't come back here again. Tears welled in her eyes, but I didn't flinch. I didn't soften. She had taught me that kindness was currency she only respected when it was scarce. So I gave her none. I watched her walk back to her car, slowly, like she was hoping I'd call her back. But I didn't. The moment she pulled out of the driveway, I locked the door and sat down with a long breath. That evening, I called my lawyer, Mark. I want to push the papers through fast, I said. No dilas. She's already been served, he replied. You're in the driver's seat now. We're going to make this as clean as possible. The following days passed without any calls or knocks. I updated the security system, changed the passcodes, moved the bedroom furniture to different sides of the room. Not because I had to, but because I needed to undo the rhythm she left behind. The memories still lurked in corners, but I was taking the house back one change at a time. I took the kids out for ice cream that weekend, told them we were doing fine, that things were changing, but they were going to be okay. They believed me. And when I looked into their eyes, I believed it too. That Sunday, I packed the last of her things into 2 suitcases and drove them to her sister's. Left them by the door. No note. Just a clean goodbye. When her sister opened the door and saw me standing there, she didn't say anything at first. Then she whispered, I didn't know it was this bad. I nodded once. Neither did I, until it was too late. She nodded back. I'm sorry. Me too, I said, and then I walked away. By the time I got back home, the sun was setting. I stepped into the quiet, empty house and looked around. It wasn't perfect. The air still held the ghost of a lie. But it was getting better. I was getting better. And for the first time in a long time, I was done cleaning up someone else's mess. Now it was just mine, and I could live with that. The first court date came 2 weeks after I filed. It was a gray Tuesday, the kind of day that matched the weight of everything that had led us there. The courthouse was cold, built from stone that somehow absorbed the silence of people who walked its halls. I sat across from Mark, my lawyer, in a stiff leather chair outside the mediation room, flipping through the final documentation we'd prepped. I had all of it: emails, texts, receipts, screenshots, the selfie with the lanyard. It wasn't about revenge anymore. This was about cleanly, legally removing her from my life. Samantha arrived 10 minutes late, flanked by a new attorney who looked like she'd just graduated law school and wasn't prepared for the kind of file Mark carried under his arm. Samantha wore her damage well, hair straightened, dressed in muted gray, face pale but composed. She didn't look at me, didn't say a word, just sat quietly across the room, the air between us stretched tight like a wire ready to snap. When the doors opened, we stepped inside. A neutral mediator sat between the two tables. Formalities came first. Then came the negotiations. Samantha's lawyer spoke confidently at first, arguing for shared equity in the home, a percentage of the bank account, and a reassessment of the retirement savings. Samantha kept her eyes on the table. Mark didn't even blink. He slid a folder across the table. "Exhibit 1, he said coolly. Adulterous conduct with a third party during a claimed professional trip, verified by a third-party admission, time-stamped receipts, and digital communication." The young lawyer's smile faltered. Samantha didn't move. "We're filing for dissolution on grounds of infidelity," Mark continued. "My client has evidence of deception, misappropriation of household funds, and reputational damage due to her misconduct. We're not negotiating assets." The mediator read through the folder. Silence stretched long. Samantha finally spoke. "I wasn't thinking straight. I didn't plan to." Mark raised a hand. "This isn't the forum for justification. This is a property negotiation." Her lawyer leaned in. "We'd like to request a recess to review the documents." "You're welcome to review them," Mark replied. "But it won't change the fact that we're offering her an out. Take the deal, walk away with personal items, no alimony, and a sealed record, or we go public." The silence was thick. Samantha's face flushed red, her jaw working like she wanted to scream, but she knew she couldn't. Not with what was in that folder. Not with the risk of it being made public record. They took the deal. She signed. Quickly, without looking up. As we left the courthouse, Mark clapped me on the shoulder. "That's it. She's out." I nodded slowly, breathing in the cool air. "And she can't touch the house? The accounts? She's got nothing but her name now," he confirmed. "And it's not worth much anymore." That night, I sat in the kitchen with a drink and stared at the stack of papers now sitting in the drawer next to my old wedding photos. The irony wasn't lost on me. Two symbols of a life built and broken by the same hands. I got a text from an unknown number later. "You didn't have to humiliate me like that in court." I stared at the screen for a long moment, then deleted it. She still didn't get it. This wasn't about humiliation. It was about justice. 2 days later, I changed the name on the deed. The house was mine now, fully. No shadows of shared signatures. No legal strings. I changed my banking passwords, wiped the joint account, redirected the child support into a separate system that my lawyer would manage. Everything was clean. Samantha called once more the following week. I didn't pick up. She didn't leave a voicemail. The next time I saw her, she was at the grocery store. Alone, wearing the same tired gray coat. She didn't say anything. Neither did I. We passed each other like strangers. And that's exactly what we were now. It didn't happen overnight. The healing, I mean. There wasn't a single moment where I woke up and thought, "I'm over it." It was slower than that, steadier. Like watching ice melt. At first, you don't notice anything. Then one day, the glass is full of water and the cold is gone. That was me. Somewhere between signing those final papers and changing the locks on the front door, I stopped thinking about Samantha first thing in the morning. I stopped flinching when my phone buzzed. I stopped replaying what went wrong. I had spent so long trying to fix a life that was never mine to save, and now I was finally building one from scratch for me. The kids adjusted faster than I expected. I kept things consistent. Same school, same routine, but I added little rituals. Wednesday night, movie marathons, Sunday pancake breakfasts. I gave them something steady, something unshakable. They asked about her less and less. When they did, I didn't lie, but I didn't poison the well either. She made some choices that hurt people. I told them. But we're going to be okay. And we were. I moved out of the house we'd shared a month after the divorce was finalized. Not because I had to. The court had given it to me clean. But I didn't want the walls anymore. They were too loud with memories. So I sold it quietly and bought a modest place across town. Nothing fancy, just clean, open, and peaceful. I picked out everything myself. No consulting, no compromising. Just me walking through each room asking, do I actually like this? It felt good to answer that question with certainty again. Work picked up. Word got around the department that I was back in full swing, more focused than ever. I started mentoring new recruits, taking on extra shifts when I wanted to, not because I was trying to escape a house that felt like a trap. I was in control now. One Friday night, Eli and Mason dragged me out to a local sports bar. It was crowded, loud, full of life. We sat in the corner booth, beers in hand, watching a playoff game neither of us really cared about. So, Eli said between sips, "How does it feel?" No ring, no leash, and nobody texting you during dinner to critique your tone. I laughed for the first time in a while, really laughed. It feels like I finally came up for air. He grinned. Yeah, well, you look different. Stronger. Like a guy who stopped begging to be seen. Because I said simply, begging. Later that night, after they left, I sat alone in my truck for a while. The parking lot was quiet, the sky clear. I didn't feel lonely. I felt available. Like the part of me that had been locked behind someone else's expectations had finally been set free. I wasn't chasing revenge anymore. I didn't care what Samantha was doing, where she lived, or who she leaned on now that her corporate safety net had snapped. I had no interest in hearing about her from mutual acquaintances. I told people not to bring her up. Not out of bitterness, but because she no longer mattered. I saw her one more time, briefly. She was walking out of a coffee shop with a to-go cup and no makeup. She saw me. We made eye contact. She looked like she wanted to say something, but I nodded once and kept walking. I didn't stop. I didn't slow down. That nod was everything. Acknowledgement, closure, and a silent warning. I'm not yours to hurt anymore. Back home that evening, I lit a fire in the backyard, pulled a chair close, and opened a book. The kids were asleep. The night was quiet, and the only sound was the crackle of logs breaking apart. I looked around and realized something simple, something profound. I wasn't trying to fill the silence anymore. I was finally enjoying it. Karma doesn't wear a clock, but it always shows up on time. I didn't look for it. I didn't stalk her social media or ask around or play detective through our few remaining mutual contacts. I wasn't watching, but the fallout found its way back to me anyway, like it always does when someone tears down their life and expects nobody to notice. It started with a voicemail from her old coworker, Rachel, one of the few who hadn't unfriended her out of embarrassment after the housewarming video. Her voice was low, almost hesitant. "Hey, David, I know we haven't talked since everything. I just thought you want to know. Samantha's been let go. HR reviewed some of the messages, and, well, she crossed a lot of boundaries. Word got out. Clients started backing off. She's not doing well." I deleted the message without replying. Not because I didn't appreciate it, but because I didn't need the confirmation. I already knew. People like Samantha build their lives on image, control, and influence. Once that cracks, they don't just lose a job, they lose their identity. I pictured her in some underfurnished apartment, reheating leftovers in silence, scrolling through her contacts and wondering why no one picks up. I never wished her pain. I just stopped shielding her from it. That's what I came to understand about real consequences. You don't have to seek revenge to see justice. Sometimes, walking away is the hardest punishment you can deliver to someone who expected you to stay broken. I heard from Mason that Paul, the guy from Chicago, bailed not long after everything blew up. Supposedly he got spooked by the fallout, realized his own wife had been close to finding out, and cut off all contact. Left Samantha holding the ruins of her fantasy with nothing but a folder full of HR complaints and a blacklisted reputation. I didn't smile when I heard it, but I didn't feel anything either. Her new life was everything she once mocked. Uncertain, unstable, unsupported. Meanwhile, mine was moving forward. The kids were thriving, more relaxed, more grounded. I kept my focus sharp at work and eventually picked up a small contract on the side, teaching security protocols to local businesses. The side hustle turned into a full-time opportunity. Within 6 months, I was running my own consultancy. My name on the website. My rules. My work. No one second-guessing my time. No one undercutting my confidence. I was living in clarity. Not just peace, but progress. One afternoon, I walked into the same grocery store where we crossed paths a few months back. This time, I didn't see her, but I did see a former neighbor who paused near the produce section and raised an eyebrow. "You hear about Samantha?" she asked. "No." Fluttily. "She's working at a temp agency now. Word is she's had 3 jobs in 4 months. Guess that whole networking trip didn't pan out like she planned." I gave a nod. It never does. That was the end of the conversation. I picked up apples. Moved on. It hit me later as I loaded groceries into the back of my truck. This was the full circle moment. The point where her story kept circling the drain while mine kept widening. I didn't need her to be punished. I didn't need to hear she regretted it. I didn't care if she got therapy or wrote an apology or reinvented herself in some far-off city. That was her burden to carry, her path to fix. All I needed was exactly what I had now. A clean break, a quiet home, and the knowledge that the best revenge wasn't public shame or courtroom wins. It was peace, and she'd never know it. Thank you for listening to the end. I hope you enjoyed it very much. Don't forget to give a like, and tell us in the comments what you would do in such a situation.